Welcome to another episode of Cheers to Careers. I'm Steve Ridinghouse, the current outreach coordinator. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Danya Issawi, a 2018 J School grad who is now in New York, working at the New York Times as a assistant news editor and also doing some reporting. Danya, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing great. Hey, thanks again for joining us. I know you always had aspirations of working for a major daily newspaper. Can you talk about that process and how you got to the New York Times?
Yeah, so it was kind of a long process. I started applying for jobs maybe April of my senior year, right before I graduated in 2018. Actually, probably sooner than that, probably March. And I really wasn't, hearing back much. I knew I wanted to end up in New York. A lot of people told me to try and start at a smaller paper. I actually met with someone from the New York Times who suggested I try starting, maybe somewhere in Jersey. But I was kind of stubborn about it and I kept applying. And I actually think I reached out to you and you told me to get in touch with a KU alumni who graduated in like 91, I think. And he gave me a lot of really great advice. We met up when I was in New York visiting, and he gave me a lot of great advice and basically just told me to be stubborn and to be persistent with my application process. So I sent kind of a cold email to one of the hiring managers at the Times, and I didn't hear back. And then I sent another one letting them know it was going to be my last day in New York before I officially moved about a month later. And I heard back and I got called in for an interview. And I ended up getting the job a week later. And it was actually like one of the only places that officially got back to me was the New York Times, which I just thought was pretty ironic.
So are you still doing now for the Times what you did when you first started?
No. So I started as a floating news assistant, which means basically like I'm learning a different job basically every 3 weeks and filling in for people who are out of town. And so I have been all over the newsroom. For the past year, I worked on the COVID desk specifically as a reporter tracking the spread of COVID in detention facilities across the country and just interviewing incarcerated individuals and their loved ones and getting, a firsthand look into what that whole experience has been like for them. And while I was doing that, I was also freelancing for the at-home desk, which replaced the travel desk, basically doing a weekly calendar of virtual events that people can watch from home. And I also freelance for the styles desk, which is mostly like my main interest in where it's kind of in my wheelhouse of talent, I guess I should say. But I cover beauty and makeup and just general weird internet trends I see for the styles desk. So I'm really all over the place, but I'm not doing necessarily the same thing I did when I first started.
So what project are you most proud of? I assume obviously COVID has taken up a lot of your time for the past year. I mean, what project
Yeah.
really has meant a lot to you?
So I would say there's two of them. The first one being, I don't know if you've seen the show Euphoria or if anybody watching has seen the show Euphoria, but it's this really amazing show that has the most amazing makeup artistry in it. And I think the makeup artists really revolutionized how people express themselves with makeup today because the show came out in like 2019 and it totally changed the game. And so I did a really awesome Instagram live on the New York Times fashion account with the makeup artist who does all of the looks for the show. And we kind of did like a tutorial while I interviewed her. And like for me, as someone who loves beauty and makeup and the show, it was like a dream come true to be talking with the person who just totally changed the game. And then on the other end of the spectrum, something I'm really proud of is over the past year, I've been doing data journalism, tracking those COVID cases in prisons and detention facilities. And that's not like my specialty by any means, but I did it, I stuck with it. And at the end of it all, my team and I put together this massive visualization of all of the data we'd collected over the past year. And part of that visualization was getting stories from incarcerated individuals and their loved ones. And unfortunately, getting stories from people who had loved ones pass while they were incarcerated. And one of the stories just really, it touched my heart. And this woman's husband passed away while he was pre-trial at the Cook County Jail. And I just felt really lucky and grateful that she had chosen to share her story with me and trust me to tell that story properly to such a large audience. And she was really thrilled with how that portion of the visualization came out. And she was really grateful that we gave life to her story. And I was really proud of that moment and of that connection I made with her.
Now, was that transition coming from KU in the Midwest to New York, was that pretty smooth, or did you go through a transitional period?
um, it's funny because I thought it was going to be really smooth. I had lived in Barcelona for 6 months, and I'd spent like a good portion of my life traveling growing up. And not, I wasn't necessarily, I wasn't expecting it to be hard, but it turned out being much harder than I thought it was going to be. And I think it was a lot at once. It was, I didn't have my car to drive me around anymore. I was taking the subway every day. I was living in a really, really small space in New York City. I wasn't used to being around so many people all the time. And like in my day to day, I didn't understand it was taking a toll on me. But looking back at that time in my life, I definitely was like going through a huge transitional period of figuring out what the heck was going on, of adjusting to my new surroundings, of adjusting to my new lifestyle, and also adjusting to working a full-time corporate job with like crazy hours. And, just, it was just a lot at once. It was actually through the transitional period, all of my coworkers are really open about going to therapy, and everyone's like, go to therapy. And so I started going to therapy, and it really helped with my transitional period. So if anyone's looking to move to a new city, I highly recommend, getting a therapist in advance because it helps.
Now, you talked about the hours. Are your hours the same week to week, or do those vary throughout the week?
So while I've been on the COVID desk, they've mostly been the same. But before that, as a floating news assistant, it varies. Like one day I would have been working 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the features print hub desk. And then the next night I would have been doing, design assistance on the front page from 5 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. And, they're all over the place. And sometimes I'd work weekends, and sometimes my week would be, Saturday to Wednesday. And then I'd have, Thursday, Friday off. It was all over the place, which was weird, especially coming here and having all my friends work normal, like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 jobs. And I was like, I was like ships passing in the night with my friends basically at that time.
Now, I know there's been a lot of talk in the past year, like New York Times and diversity on staff. And I know that's always an ongoing process. Can you speak about how that process is going? I mean, is it getting better?
I mean, I think it depends on who you ask. I think it's good that the company is making an effort and is talking about it out in the open, and they're getting people to come and assess the situation. I do think there's a lot of in-house progress that needs to be made, especially, with young journalists, because I think the Times has a tendency to miss out on a lot of new and young talent that isn't recognized just because, everything happens so quickly there. So I'm happy that they're making strides toward more diversity and equity and inclusion. But, I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done still.
And I know you're Arabic and you speak Arabic. How has that come into play in the newsroom, or just living in New York? I mean, has that been a factor?
Yes. I also think, this is an interesting question because I've had this question actually a lot, if speaking Arabic has helped me professionally, and if being Arab has helped me professionally. I think it's really interesting because I don't really see like my white colleagues necessarily being asked that per se. And this is something I kind of touched on actually while I was at KU, because it was something I was kind of paranoid about, that I was going to be like hired as like a diversity hire and not based on like, my merit, or just, because I was bilingual. And I actually haven't found that particularly being bilingual has helped me in the newsroom, but it has helped me in New York, because this is such a diverse community, and it's been kind of thrilling to interact with people who are of a similar cultural or linguistic background as myself. One time a guy came up to me and was like clearly so lost and didn't speak English. And he was trying to show me his phone and, ask for directions. And I noticed it was in Arabic. So I was able to give him directions in Arabic, which was like, a huge moment for me as a New Yorker because I'm directionally challenged. And so I was like, I could give this man directions, huge win. And I was able to use, my second language. And he was extremely excited that he found an Arabic speaker in the city. So I found it more useful within my community rather than professionally.
And I know when you started at KU, I believe you were a pre-med student before transitioning to journalism. What prompted that change to journalism? What inspired that?
I did journalism all throughout high school. I was on yearbook and I was a yearbook editor and I loved storytelling. But there was like a disconnect for me. Like I couldn't see myself doing it professionally. And so I was like, I'm good at science. I'll do medicine. And then I went on a trip to Istanbul to work with Syrian refugees and orphans at a school that a friend of a friend of a friend's mom was putting on because we're Syrian and Palestinian. And I went to work at the school for 3 weeks and I helped teach like a computer class. And I also was like the camp journalist. So my job was basically going around the school, taking photos of the kids, interviewing them for the organization's website, for their Facebook page, etc. And I was just like so moved by the experience and hearing stories and being able to relay them and tell these stories that I was like, I think I am in the wrong profession. I think I would make a mediocre doctor at best. I think I would make a much better journalist and a much better storyteller. So I came back to school. I literally landed in the United States and then went to school like 3 days later and I changed my major to journalism. And I'm extremely glad I did.
And I know at your time at KU, you worked for the Daily Kansan. I think you had some internships with Dallas Morning News and USA Today. How did those experiences kind of shape you for what you're doing now?
I think a big part of what I learned in journalism was from working at the Daily Kansan. Like I really learned how to copy edit at the newspaper. I learned how to work with people at the newspaper. I learned really good nitty gritty details that it takes to be a good journalist at the newspaper. I learned about good work ethic at the newspaper for sure. And in Dallas, that was my first time writing for, a larger audience for a larger paper. And that was a really interesting experience because I wrote about topics that might not necessarily resonate with the audience in Dallas. And it was a good experience in terms of like, how can I communicate with a body of people that might not necessarily agree with what I'm thinking and writing? Because I worked as the intern on the editorial desk, so I was writing like opinion pieces. So that was a really interesting experience navigating that space and trying to figure out the best way to relay a message. And I think it made me a better writer and a better communicator. And I also just generally love the people that I worked with. They were all older than me, but I felt very close to all of them. And I still follow a lot of them on Instagram and communicate with them regularly. So it was a great experience.
And also at your time at KU, I seem to recall you're part of this panel discussion. I think the future of journalism. I think Gerald Sy was part of it, Bob Dotson. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? And what do you remember about that panel discussion?
Yes, I do remember that very distinctly, actually, because my mom drove in from Kansas City to watch me speak on the panel, which was really cute of her. And I remember, I think I was like the only woman on the panel as well, which I thought was interesting. And I remember afterward just like feeling really elated that I was able to speak about journalism to a group of people. And I just remember talking with people afterward and like getting people's like business cards and stuff. And I was just really excited about the prospect of, potentially finding a job or something from that experience. And I remember during it, I like almost like blacked out of my memory of like what I was saying. And I remember asking my mom, I was like, did I sound okay? And she's like, yeah, you did great. And I was like, awesome. Like, I hope that went well. I just remember it was like a really thrilling experience. And it was really fun to do.
Well, speaking of future journalism, I think we're about 10 days away, 12 days away from commencement. I mean, if you had to deliver the keynote address to the class of 2021, is there a certain message you would share with future journalists?
Oh gosh. Just like don't give up. Don't get tired. I was really feeling discouraged during my application process. I felt like I had done so much to try and set myself up for getting a job out of college. And I felt like so many people were telling me that like I wasn't going to be able to get the job that I wanted. I wasn't going to be able to have the career that I had or want to have. But I just was stubborn and I just persevered. So I would tell you guys to just continue to persevere. Don't get, discouraged or upset if you don't have it all figured out right away. Nobody has it all figured out right away. Um, there's going to be time and there's going to be a really important period of growth for you after graduation. And I would just say to like lean into it. It's okay if you don't have it all figured out. Like if you have a passion and you have a drive to do something and a desire to do it, it's going to work itself out as long as you take the steps to do so. And again, it's okay if you don't have all your ducks in a row right away. It's going to work out and you're going to be able to fulfill your dream, whether that's storytelling, photography, writing, etc. If you just keep with it and keep at it, like you're going to make it someday. You're going to make it.
Yeah, well said, Danya. Again, I appreciate your time. I don't know if you had time to grab a mug or anything. You might have a New York Times. Awesome. Well, again, Danya, I appreciate your time and cheers to your careers. And I hope to see you on campus soon.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Danya.